Great. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. The September MTC meeting, called meeting to order at 7:02. Um, uh, First, let's review the minutes of the August 9th meeting. Let me pull those up so everybody can see. As always, Larry, thank you for your work in putting these together. So in our August meeting, we discussed some Civic Plus upgrades, discussed the possibility of finding a UXR, user experience researcher volunteer, and we also continued our discussion of digital content accessibility, standardized vendor question list, and continued our discussion of the cellular deserts. Any glaring issues, motions to amend, correct?
No.
I would move to approve the minutes.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay. Uh, go around a virtual roll call. Joe,
Aye.
Will,
Yes. Aye.
Larry,
Aye.
Angela,
Aye.
and likewise I, and approve them as is unanimous. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. ARPA projects, town website upgrade proposal. I do want to share that we did have a person reach out, a person volunteer, a user experience researcher volunteer to assist the town and basically do some interviews and walk through what are the potential key areas we want to focus on for a replacement website. Let me share the person's resume on the screen here. And if we decide, we can vote as a committee to approve this person to engage this person as a consultant. That way we can use the standard legal agreement to effectively act as a consultant of the MTC, and we'll have the confidentiality clauses in place because we'll be sharing with them the raw results of the town survey where we received quite a bit of feedback on the current town website. This person recently graduated a master's PhD in psychology and is looking for volunteer opportunities for her experience. And what's nice is that she also has some data science tool experience, so we can give her some raw data to do some additional number crunching based on the survey results if necessary. She's living in Waltham right now, but I had a chat with her and she would be interested in volunteering for maybe between 5 and 10 hours a week for a couple of months for this project, and enough to effectively provide input for what the requirements would be for our upgraded website. Effectively, how out of the box would we want to use the new upgraded version of Civic Plus versus how are there any customizations we would want to target based on our particular citizens' needs? Any questions or comments on this?
Looks good. I mean, she has the UX researcher as well as the UX consulting experience.
Where was her PhD earned?
It was in Brandeis.
Nice.
Okay.
Was there additional research on the second page?
Yes.
Did she make a commitment to how much time she would devote?
She said she could allocate up to 10 hours a week for 2, possibly 3 months. And I told her hopefully it wouldn't take that much time, but it will definitely, if she is doing one-on-one interviews with both residents as well as department heads to understand their needs and their concerns or gather opportunities for improvement of their current website, then it will certainly take quite a bit of time. So I volunteered to at least help feed her contacts, and that she would then reach out and can schedule the interviews and start gathering the information. Okay, any other questions or comments?
I'm assuming we had one volunteer. Is that an accurate statement?
We had one volunteer. Yes.
Okay, great. let's approve her, man.
Okay, I propose that we engage Wenbing Zhang as a volunteer consultant for the MTC for UXR website. Any seconds?
I'll second that.
Okay, go with Larry, and we'll go around the room for, okay, those in favor, well, favor or opposed. Will?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
And likewise, aye. Thanks.
She also has 7 publications on her LinkedIn.
Matt,
Yes,
can you
I'll
send
share with you the
a copy
resume.
of the document so I can include it?
Yep, definitely. Definitely, will do. Okay, next topic of the town website upgrade proposal, the Civic Plus upgrade. Angela or Jay, where are we? Do you want to provide an update on that?
I mean, I don't have much more of an update as far as the ARPA part piece of it goes. I'm not sure if you guys have reached out to any of the select board members or anything like that. I know I have submitted a capital request with the capital planning board committee as far as budgeting it, at least for next year if I needed to. So I have a placeholder in there currently right now with them so that we can discuss it at their, I'm not sure if it's going to be this month's or next month's meeting. I just know that they have me penciled in at some point.
Well, Will and I and Jay met with the vendor again, and now I think we do have a much more detailed quote. He did come back with a line by line quote for us for the larger of the 2 different upgrade paths that we talked about. It seemed quite reasonable and seemed to be in alignment with what I would think we would expect to see for the larger upgrade.
Could I just interrupt for a second? I was busy typing the previous motion and I sort of lost the thread of what we're discussing. I'm sorry.
The
website upgrade?
Civic Plus website upgrade proposal. Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to see what they're proposing, and love to. And just for my own understanding, does that include some implementation?
Yes.
One-time implementation, and do they share exactly what they're targeting with that implementation? Of how much customization? It's still to be determined for our particular needs.
Yeah, so it definitely is going to be part of our particular needs, and it is important for us to meet internally and externally. Internally meaning like, department heads, and also with, MTC obviously that discuss this to get feedback from you guys. It is important for us to give them the information that they need as far as like, what's important for the building department, what's important for the technology department, what's important for the select board. So that's going to be part of the planning phase as far as, putting the website together. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it was every 3 years. Angela, correct me if I'm wrong on that. It was every 3 years you can upgrade the website, if I'm not mistaken. Was it
Every
3 or
4
5?
years.
Every 4 years, right?
years.
So that's
Yeah.
actually included in the pricing for
Yeah.
our annual cost. So it's like a fraction of that amount is put into that annual cost, so that every 4 years we can renew the website if we need to
Oh, wow.
refresh it. Yeah, yeah. So
That's
keeps it
wonderful.
fresh.
We
Yeah.
didn't want to share the pricing information publicly, Matt, because we were
Okay.
concerned that that would violate some of the vendor, vendor agreement things. But, they have a one-time cost to do the initial redesign and setup, and then they have an ongoing cost. So I do think we need to determine, should we create something, a request that goes officially to Board of Select and ARPA to sign up on that funding, so that when we're ready to pull the trigger, we know that it's approved and ready to go. Or, just what's the financial process that we should use for getting the funds released?
Yeah, I think we should. If you wouldn't mind, Angela, talking with the ARPA committee to discuss that, as well as us. Yeah. Go ahead, Jay.
If I'm not mistaken, the board has to
I was just
approve.
gonna say, yeah. I think the select board at this point has to approve what happens next, because I
Right.
think the ARPA committee has been disbanded, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, as a okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
so we could take something, because it did go in the ARPA package. So that committee that produced the recommendations, the website was one. It was actually quite a bit more, because we used a higher range in case we didn't use Civic Plus, if we wanted to go for custom implementation. So we actually are going back to them with a lower request than was with the original ask.
Great. Yeah, if you could approach the select board with that, Sam, who's one of the representatives to the MTC, and work with him. It would be personally, I think it would be great to make sure there's enough buffer in there for the implementation to give, if there does come up some, hopefully, I mean, I think we're all very much hoping that it's out of the box as much as possible with minor UX tweaks, look and feel only. But if there are one particular feature we want to do a little bit more customization on, it'd be nice to have a little bit of flexibility in the budget. But
One question I have is, how much conversion is included?
So they give you a standard price as far as how many pages they're going to convert over to the new setup. But one thing that, even the vendor had provided us was we have probably way too many pages currently.
Well, hold on, time out. What is a page, first of all? Is a page, if I click on the minutes for August 9th for this committee, is that a page?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is a page, because if we do that, then we're talking hundreds and hundreds of pages, because there are hundreds of pages in the committees.
So
Yeah, well, I noted in the transcript there was an extensive discussion about archiving and the minutes and how and our volume of minutes per committee.
I don't believe that has to do with the actual minutes per se, as far as the actual web pages on the site, like boards and committees. And then there's all these boards that are on here, some of which don't even exist from what I'm understanding. And then there's, within those are other links to other pages, but not necessarily the minutes and agendas. I believe that was actually a separate situation for minutes and agendas.
It would seem to me that their primary concern are rendered HTML pages and not files that are displayed.
Yes.
Files that are displayed really don't result in any additional work or resource on their part.
Okay, but if you take the Public Accessibility Committee, I just posted some minutes that had 15 documents associated with the minutes. And so my question is, how are we going to schlep those 16 things over to this new site, and who's going to do that?
The quote includes resource for 100 meetings. So that's what's in the quote. I think if we wanted more than 100 meetings, we would need to ask them to augment that, or ideally it's easy enough that in the new system, people can, just upload documents themselves. But I understand it's quite a number of documents.
Well, okay, that I understand what you just said, but when it comes to minutes and it comes to, the documents that are discussed, that is actually controlled by the town clerk and his staff for legal reasons, actually. So there's that. And then when you say about 100, I have probably created minutes for over 50 meetings myself, just me, over the years, over two different committees over the years. So, I mean, I would say that this is probably a very big task. And then, if you look at like the board of directors of the Southborough Library, they have 10, 20, they have 10, 15 documents that are attached to their minutes as well.
Should we reach out and have a conversation with Jim about how much could be archived and what our legal requirements are per committee for what actually needs to be migrated?
I'm not 100% sure that we can. I mean, when you say archived, what you're really saying is that they will no longer be directly accessible to people, which they are right now.
I have a question because I'm confused. It sounds like Angela's talking about the cost of including those minutes on the website, and Will is talking about the effort to move them to the new website.
I think both things are relevant. You're right, Larry. Yes, you're right.
You're
right.
Since they're just files, I mean, moving them to the new website is a bunch of copies in theory.
It's a lot of clicking. It's a hell of a lot of clicking, and then it's got to be done correctly so you don't make mistakes.
That's true.
This is one of the open questions, I think, for the new Civic Plus software. Clearly, we have a document management and public document management system requirement, and I would hope that each of those would not be considered pages that need migration. I mean, it should be some sort of stock out of the box capability that we shouldn't necessarily need, to pay for migration for each of those.
Well, let's not worry so much about who's going to do it or pay, but I think we have to talk to the town clerk and find out what he thinks has to be done with respect to when all the dust settles. Are all of the things that are available now still available on the new site? And if not, what is acceptable and what's not?
I think you're right. And so I'm going to, in fact, Mr. Haggerty is in attendance and open it to answer that question.
All right.
How are you tonight?
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, a couple of thoughts. Sometimes we conflate the open meeting law requirements and the public records requirement laws, and they end up in one spot when they're really two different animals. The open meeting law requires that the town maintain minutes of the meetings, and there's a whole laundry list of what that represents, as well as documents that are used at the meeting, and they have a three-pronged test as to what constitutes a document used at the meeting. So a heck of a lot of lawyers got together in a room and came up with definitions of stuff, okay? Now, nowhere in the open meeting law does it say anything about where those are put together. In fact, they specifically say that documents don't have to be retained with the agendas themselves, all right? With the minutes themselves. Now, let's switch gears and put our public records hats on. The public records law requires that an agenda only be maintained for 1 year, all right, unless it's litigation, things like that. So we could destroy them after it doesn't matter. But minutes have to be retained in perpetuity as well as the documents used at the meeting. So a few years ago, harking back on my experience on committees here in town, recognizing that when one person left a committee, one chair left and one came on, in theory, the document's supposed to be passed over, but they really weren't. So we have this huge gap and stuff in the past. So I brought a bylaw at town meeting, made the clerk responsible to retain all documents used at all meetings, all right? So we request the documents come to us. Now, in consultation with our town council, we scan those, we retain those in searchable PDFs, and we store all that internally on our S drive, shared drive, as well as up in the cloud. As a convenience to residents, we post that on the website adjacent to the agendas, with the agendas themselves. We do that ourselves. So we get the minutes from the residents. We take all the documents in whatever form they're sent in. We convert them all to PDFs, make them all searchable, and put them all up with the minutes as well. There's no legal requirement to do that. The advantage of that is it's much more transparent to the voters. People that have the same questions can go look in one spot so they're not beating Mark's office up with public records requests. It just makes a lot of sense for us to do that. We also go through a process of reviewing those documents before we put them up there. And that's very time consuming. And frankly, most people are surprised that we do that because we've received documents from people that have been used at a meeting that contain sensitive information that shouldn't be placed up there. People's employment information, phone numbers. We've received resumes of applicants, all kinds of stuff. So we take the time to go through all those documents and review them as kind of a double check just to keep everybody out of trouble. So that's how it all ends up on the website. But again, the point of it is we have a town bylaw that requires the clerk to maintain it, but it's strictly as the convenience that we put all this stuff up ourselves, but there's no legal requirement to do it.
Thank you for that answer. And another question, Mr. O'Leary, I think you provided some great insight here. Do you want to describe what you mentioned in chat?
Yeah. So forgive me if I was mistaken. There was concern about the amount of minutes that were archived or posted up in the Town of Southborough's website being, say, tallied against the quote-unquote page count that's in the new agreement that you have with the vendors. Yep. So I was trying to sort of shed some light on, in my experience in dealing with Civic Plus and their different module systems. And correct me if I'm wrong, is the current site Civic Plus as well right now?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Jay, you might be able to speak to this or not, but in my experience, when you dump PDFs into your document management system in Civic Plus, those documents are just documents that are managed in that module. They're not actual pages themselves.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're concerned about like your minutes, like your PDF counting against your pages that you have in your vendor agreement, I don't think that's anything you need to worry about.
Well, one question would be, are we shifting document management systems when we go to their new platform? So in other words, all the minutes that are in our current document management system, do those all have to be migrated over to the new document management system?
And is that included in the upgrade? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're at that phase yet, but it's definitely something we should discuss at some point in the future.
It's a lot of, it's a lot of clicking if indeed, those have to be done one at a time. I mean, maybe there's a bulk way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, they might have a migration tool. I don't think we asked them that in the meeting, but given how they priced it, my guess is they have some kind of migration tool because the cost is quite low for the first 100 meetings.
Okay, I do have another question that might bear on pages though, and that is that I have created Drupal pages, like pages that link or have links to other content or a survey. Are those considered pages against the page count? And also, when we talk about pages, I know that on the Trails Committee, they got a lot of pages that hang off their main page. And a lot of them are maps. They're kind of specialized pages. I think they're pages that were created with Drupal, on a fairly custom basis.
I think that's a good question. Question. Is it true that? Go ahead.
Matt.
Is it true that the current system is based on Drupal, but the new platform is based on a custom engine that they wrote? Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So the website is a Drupal website. So, and again, that goes back to the fact of eliminating pages that we don't need, so that we don't have to migrate. I think they like 5,000 or 6,000 different pages out there. It's just, again, it all goes back to the fact that there are pages out there that don't exist like in a sense, like a committee that doesn't exist anymore, or, do we need that there still? There might be something there that was put there, unintentionally, that might be floating around on the website that we don't know about yet. So there's a lot of things like that we're going to find out. And it's going to be a lot of the discovery phase, right? And figuring out where we are. And then it's all part of the planning process with the company as far as what do we have, what do we need, talking to our, our department managers and anybody that's associated with the department managers, and then communicating to maybe even some of the, major boards as well, as far as what they need on their websites. So, and committees. So it's definitely going to be a long process as far as planning it and going through the process of figuring out what we need. But that's what that whole phase is for. So we can figure out what those answers are then.
This is something that the user experience researcher could possibly help bootstrap as she interviews and works with the various department heads and committee heads. What is the functionality they need, as well as what are the list of pages that they consider most vital to, on the existing pages they consider most vital to their respective board or committee.
Yeah, I guess, I'd have one question for Jim. He doesn't have to answer it tonight, but, let's say we get this new system in, right? And it looks great. And, but there's still a lot of work to do to go back and do back conversion and whatever we decide is going to be done, with existing stuff. And so the question for Jim really is, what is a acceptable amount of conversion that's been done, or acceptable amount of content that's been brought over for us to go live, or is that 100%, or is it, is there some lower level? And that would really be something he should be thinking about in terms of, the legal requirements and also what he would like to present to the town.
Two thoughts on that. Number one, there are no legal requirements at all to the question you're asking. It drives the second question: what do people look at? And I think for the most part, people look at the current year. But then people go back. It's an interesting mention you bring this up, because we've been going back and digitizing records going back 100 years. All right. And we're just about in the final stages of that. So the trick becomes, somebody says, I think something happened in 1967. So we have a zillion meetings in 67. So we've taken those and consolidated those to all those to 67, save the town meetings, whatever. But then people know it's in the 60s. So now we're putting them together, all those PDFs into the 60s. I think the same thing, we've talked about doing that as well for boards that are, I'm going to use the word controversial, or that people want to look back and find out. Select board, planning board, ZBA, the big three. And when people want to go back and say, when did they talk about Maple Crest Drive? It was a couple of years ago. What happened there? So we're going to take those and do like a decade's worth of for all those, so people can look one spot to find that. But I think really when you get beyond the select board, planning, and CBA, I don't think you really need to have more than 1 or 2 or 3 years of meeting minutes live. People always come back and look at that after the fact. We took all the records once we took over. I think it was in 2016. That everything that you see on the website is once we became responsible for it. And I think that really that might not be but might be a good way to go. That's when I don't know what the stats show as to what people look at on the web, but my guess is those big three are the ones that people want to go back and they know there's an issue. They're not sure when. And if we could just, give them by year or decade to search, I think that would satisfy what we're looking at just for those three.
Okay. I mean, I would encourage you to, make sure that you dot the I's and cross the T's on that answer, because that can drive a lot of work, and it can also drive a lot of schedule delay, depending on what the answer it turns out to be.
Yeah, I would expect that the part of the engagement that would involve the consultancy, they would want to review our access logs to get a sense of where the bulk is versus the long tail to help drive some of these decisions about how far deep we want to go if it's not a legal encumbrance.
That's a good idea. Taking a look at access logs. Obviously, we have the result of the survey, which people talked about, which is their favorite portions of the website to access and how frequently. But actually seeing the access logs, provided we can differentiate between the spider bots and actual end users, should be good.
Matt, the person who's doing the UX consultancy, they're going to talk to the heads of the department, but they're also going to talk to some of the residents, right? To make sure that we understand what the residents
Yes.
are looking for. Okay,
And we
great.
specifically included a question in the survey to asking people to if they would be willing to share their email address if for follow-up questions. And I was imagining something precisely like this, so we can email them and set up a time. Yeah.
I guess the other question I would just have is that, when all the dust settles, what's going to be better? I mean, what are we delivering here? I think it'd be nice to have a list that we can point at so that if people ask that question, they can say, well, we're going to have this and this and this, and there's going to be better calendaring or whatever, just so that we have something to market this with.
Yeah. I think that's going to be part of the discovery process.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and move on if that's okay. Do we want to quickly touch on the standardized technology vendor question list, Angela?
Sure. I emailed out the revised document. Thank you for the feedback. I took out some of the technical lingo, and I don't know if I can share my screen, but I cannot share my screen. And hold on.
It looked great to me when I reviewed it earlier today.
Yeah.
You're able to, right, Angela?
I can, yeah. I just want to make sure I'm not sharing the wrong document. Got a couple things open. Okay, there it is. Let me. There we go. Yeah, I see it. Okay. All right. So there were quite a few. We used SLA and some other things like that in this section. So I cleaned up all of that technical language, and then. Jay, I didn't include the new person here. I just put you as the primary contact. If you want me to add him, I'm happy to, but I just didn't have his information. So just let me know one way or the other if you want him listed there or not.
Okay.
And then, again, a lot of this was just language cleanup. But I mean, I think we're at the point where we could run a few of these and start handing them out to the departments and start getting their feedback. Is this good for them? Is this something that they are ready to see? Or is there other stuff that they might want?
I like it. Yeah. I think we should start some dry runs.
Great. All right.
Can I ask a question if that's okay?
Please.
I may have missed something on this topic maybe in one of the meetings, but what is the overall purpose of the document, I guess is my question. Is it for all vendors, not just technology, or is it for all departments within the town for them to have like a standardization of how they question the vendors, or is it for the boards and committees on how they would want to question vendors? That was the part I was kind of confused on.
Yeah, so it started when we were doing a lot of the initial interviews with different department heads, and we were finding that a number of them had kind of, I don't want to say gone rogue, but had kind of gone off and got some technology services on their own. And there wasn't any central mechanism at that time to really help them evaluate those technology choices that they were making. So we basically said, could we give them something that it would at least start to get them educated on the types of things that we think about when we're reviewing a technology vendor. Ultimately, what we want them to do is get to you, Jay. We want you to be aware that they're talking to a technology vendor. We want them to bring you into the planning and evaluation process so that we make sure that we don't have departments going out and making decisions that we just don't know about, that we're just blind to. And so ideally, this gives them enough data so that they're at least starting to be smart about it. And then they know essentially just to pull you in as quickly as they start those discussions with the vendors.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely it definitely will assist. In my time that I've been here so far, I've made it abundantly clear
Yeah.
that if there's something technical that's going on in their project, they need to reach out to me immediately, because I'm just not, and that was one thing that I had heard when I first started, but there was a lot of rogue, talking to vendors, and then suddenly it became a technology project, and then nobody knew to reach out to me. So yeah, that was, I've had the opportunity over the last year to speak not only individually but in groups, because we've had manager meetings together and have that discussion. Is there projects that are coming up? Is technology part of that project? Is it, if you think you're using a cloud service, that's technology. It doesn't mean it's not, technology because it's called cloud service and I'm not managing it. It's something that I need to be involved with. So I've made that pretty clear to everybody. But this will definitely, yeah, I agree. Definitely.
And maybe this evolves into being a
starts.
document that you actually just use, like when a new manager is hired or when a new department head is hired, you can go into them with the pack and this is part of it. And, here you go.
Yep.
Okay.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, but part of this is to communicate that finding new technology isn't as easy as just doing a Google search and adding your credit card. If they think that's just limited to that, they clearly have been making the wrong decision. And is it true that this is not just the department heads, but it's also committees as well? We would like
I think
committees,
anybody
where
who's
possible,
using a technology
don't
vendor.
stand up your own website, right? Especially hopefully with hopefully that's one of the capabilities of the new website software is we can delegate portions of the website so the committees themselves can maintain their own respective portions, and they don't go out and do some sort of rogue, hosting service with a completely different domain, and it just, it'd be better to have consolidate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay, thank you, Angela. Thanks, Angela and Jay, for your work on this. Okay, town tech status updates, staffing for our new server config, and then network architecture. Let's start with staffing and new server / switch config, if we've received any of that yet.
So yeah, the switches have actually come in. Literally, it was seriously, it was a random. I think it was like a random Tuesday morning. I started getting these alerts from Dell saying, "Shit, here's your shipment details," and I'm like, "What's going on?" Because I literally just spoke to them, and this is no lie. Like I literally just spoke to them like not even the week prior, because this was more like, I wouldn't even say speaking. It was more like assertively speaking. Where is my product at this point? Because the time frame that was like August 19th had now passed, and I had no product. So I reached out to them again about it, and then suddenly I started getting alerts about the shipment coming in, because at one point they were telling me it was not going to come until the end of December. So that's when I was like, wait, this can't be. There's no, I mean, come on, this is way past a year now at this point. So the switches came in, the setup has started, but they were still pieces to the puzzle that they were missing. We needed some SFPs for our core switch, so we had to get that ordered. We needed some fiber optic cables for that as well to get into our core switch, which apparently they did not spec at the time. So they have added that, and I've been waiting for that shipment process to come in. I got one of the pieces in today. I got another one coming in on Friday, I believe. The servers are technically installed, racked, installed. Switches are installed. Switches are fibered and connected to the servers. The SXI is installed. All updates and patches have been applied to both devices, the switches and the hosts. Once I get this other piece in, they're scheduling another person to come out again to finish up the rest of the install. And once they get to that point, I will start hopefully migrating servers over. That would be the best thing to hear at this point. But yeah, once I get to that point, I'll let you guys know more. But I'm just waiting for that piece of the puzzle to get in place. As far as staffing, and I know that staffing is on there, Hassan has been working out brilliantly. Things have been running along. It's been amazing right now as far as being able to delegate some of the stuff. I had a couple of, sessions with him with select board to make sure that he was, in a good place. I actually took a week vacation about 3 weeks ago. That was amazing. So that felt good. I did have one issue come up, and it had nothing. Yeah, right. I did have one issue come up that it was nothing he could control. We had a lightning storm on the Friday before in Southborough, as you guys all know. You live here, so and it took down a lot of places. It took down the fiber. We thought at one point over one of the towers. Power was off here at the townhouse and a bunch of the other buildings in town. So by like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., I think that night, things started coming back to light. The connection over at the tower was up and it was functioning. So I thought everything was fine. But on Monday morning, Hassan was calling me in a panic, like, half the phones are down here. I don't know what's going on because it just, he didn't understand that the phone system, like where the switches were essentially. So I came in and I assisted him that Monday to get us up and running. But that was the only thing that came up that was like, something that was just in that, a random situation that was out of our control. But no, he's definitely been working out. I'm here with you people tonight, and he's in the select board making sure that they're functioning. So that's one piece of how this is truly assisting, and it's really starting to make an impact on my daily work. Things are happening, projects are happening in a sense. Meetings are starting to happen with department managers on different projects that are going on. So a lot of things like that have been really, really, helping me and working in a great way. So.
Wonderful news. That's fantastic. Okay, and I don't know, Joe, if you have any updates. We won't, obviously don't go into any details, but network architecture assessment. I don't know if you had any time for that.
Yeah, very little progress since last meeting, so my apologies for that. I expect to have some questions out to Jason by this time next week, just in time for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. But as an aside, I am not standing for re-election for the Aaron Advisory Council, so that will get me some time back to devote to the town.
Just a quick update to cybersecurity awareness. If you're going to be questioning me next week, I am going to be having the company that started the process with their cybersecurity assessment. They're going to be in physically and also on the phone with a couple of meetings next week. So maybe you get in the mix and you hear some of the stuff that comes up as well. But yeah, they're going to be in person Thursday and Monday.
Your audio dropped, Jay. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
It's
like
muffled.
muffled.
We can hear you slightly, but it's kind of muffled. It's like you're
It was
way far
perfect
away
a minute ago.
Can you hear me?
Now
Yeah,
we can.
that's great.
Now it's back.
Now? Okay. So yeah, next, you still can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So next week, the company that we're starting the cybersecurity assessment with is coming in physically. They'll be in on Thursday, and they're also we're having a Zoom call on Monday, and a couple of meetings on Tuesday. So it might be good timing for Joe maybe to interject and get some info at the same time, because I'll kind of be in that mindset of information digging. But yeah, that just wanted to give you a heads up at the same time that that's happening as well.
That'd be wonderful. If you wouldn't mind, Jay, send us some meeting details, where, when, and to Joe and myself, and if we're available, we'd love to join.
Yeah, okay. I'll move what I can.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. Thanks. Okay. Let's move on to the schools. Be Mr. O'Leary, love to hear how things are going at the beginning of the school year for the tech group, and once again, think about if there's any synergies we can think about. I'd love to explore again at some point in time, sharing of resources like network connections. Once we've done the assessment of our network architecture, we can take that offline, Joe, to work with Mr. O'Leary on, and Jay on, of course. And then offer to Ryan and the schools also the services that Joe and I are offering to the town of doing network architecture review as well as security posture assessments. So these are things that we do full time in our full-time jobs.
Sounds like you guys have some pretty interesting jobs. Kickoff for Southborough school year. Otherwise pretty good. Some real big hangups that we ran into after some enhancements that we made this summer to the print management system and sort of the network architecture upgrades that we did in the data center. I don't want to get too into where it is located now, just because it's a public meeting. But what we ran into when we sort of got everything up to snuff in regards to, say, 2020 standards in terms of network printing, we discovered that end user devices, most of the staff in Southborough, are sadly out of date and in desperate need of patching, with a hesitancy for end users to particularly do it themselves, or with an extreme amount of patience to wait in the line that it would take for the two IT technicians in Southborough to put their hands on every machine and manually update them. A lot of the operating systems in Southborough are not centrally managed, so we are sort of relying on the end users to make sure that they keep their systems patched. But with so many unpatched systems, yeah,
these are districts or town-owned systems, basically district-owned systems that are not centrally managed. Is that right?
That is what I have stepped into. Yes.
Any idea what the logic behind that one was?
Tell you a little bit about more of the specifics offline too when you're interested.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, anything security related, we can take offline. Yeah.
But for the most part, we were dealing with a lot of unpatched systems amongst teacher devices in Southborough, which was not lending them the sort of enhancements to cryptography needed to get on centralized print management. So we've been running for about the first 2 weeks of school with, I'd say, 50% of the staff in town not being able to print, which is, you can probably glean as a little bit of a nightmare from a user side perspective in the first few days of school. Other than that, though, things are fantastically smooth. That's kind of a big thorn in everybody's side in the school district right now, is getting everybody patched and up and online and able to print. Student device distribution is going good. We're maintaining the one-to-one program nicely. Got to find some creative ways for funding to make sure every student does have a device in their hands. But coming into the 22-23 school year, Southborough looks pretty good in that regard. And I'm happy to answer any other sort of questions you guys might have about, the landscape of the 4 schools there.
One of the questions I have is, I know we're starting. I don't know exactly when budget planning starts, but I'm guessing we're starting to get into budget season for the spring town meetings, and we'd love to get thoughts on any sort of major or significant technology changes or upgrades that the school systems are planning to include in the 2023 or 2024 budget that would be basically going toward in front of town meetings this next spring. Have you given any thought to that, or is it you not started budget planning yet?
We're kind of creeping into the budget planning season. From my perspective, it is going to be a majority of the budget, and no major changes to infrastructure or large projects, I guess, in regards to the 4 buildings in Southborough, but mainly an upgrade of staff devices and repurchasing of student devices for the older Chrome OSs that fall out of support, so they can still take standardized testing.
Okay. And remind me, for educational technology, is the district, and perhaps this is just for my own curiosity, are we using a mixture of Google Classroom as well as Canvas? Or are we moving towards one or the other?
Yeah, it depends mainly on the facility, what the staff there prefer to use. Algonquin Regional and much of the middle schools are into Canvas, with Google Classroom still being pretty prevalent through the elementary schools.
And I heard the district's moving away from Zoom. Is that accurate?
District has moved away from Zoom from a cost and value perspective, yes.
Towards Google, is that right? Google Meet?
We have upgraded the Google Suite from Fundamentals, which is the free tier, to Suite for Education Plus, yes, which carries the upgrades to Meet.
Cool. Any other questions for Mr. O'Leary? Okay, well, we appreciate you providing that update, and yeah, I'd love to. We'll find some time. Maybe Jill, I'd love to grab some of your time, and Ryan, we can take it offline to discuss architecture ideas and security.
Yeah, please feel free. Fire me an email, and yeah, absolutely love to know what sort of questions you have, and also love to answer them.
Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and move on. We're going to skip order here. We want to prioritize Mr. Hegarty while we have him. Let's move to the electronic clickers for voting at ATM. And Mr. Hegarty requested that we discuss this in today's meeting and be able to answer any questions that we as a committee might have, because he will be taking it towards our next town meeting for voter support. So
Next town meeting being the October 15th special session.
that's my understanding, but I'll defer to Mr. Hegarty.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. There's actually no legal requirement for the town to have a bylaw to choose the method of voting. It's 100% at the discretion of the moderator as to when, how, and why to use different methods of voting. That being said and done, the moderator wanted to bring a warrant article before the voters at this special town meeting to make them aware of this and just to get discussion and let the voters weigh in onto the potential use of clickers as one measure of doing it. There are towns in Massachusetts that just go the opposite way. There are still a half a dozen or so that use these hand-turn paper ballots, for voting at elections instead of ours. But believe it or not, at town meetings, there are some towns that have a tradition of hand counts up until Hull just went with clickers, I think, this past year. Prior to that, they would have 5 or 6 votes at meetings where they would have secret ballots, hand out papers and such. There are other towns, believe it or not, that bring in a voting machine and they hand people ballots at the start of the night that have yes or no, and they have pairs of these. So when people want to have a ballot, secret ballot, you mark your ballot, you come up front, you drop it in the box, and off you go. So there are as many different normals, if you will, of how people vote as in different towns as there are towns. It's each one takes on its own personality. So what got me thinking about this is when I started the method of calculating, let me back up. There are certain types of articles that legally were required to have a counted vote. Taking an interest in real estate, borrowing money, a few things like that. Some require 2/3. Believe it or not, there are even some articles that require a 90% vote. Kind of a crazy thing. But anyway, the point is, the moderator would require to take a hand count, even if the hall's full of, say, 500 people and 2 people, 498 were in favor and 2 people raise their hands against. That's not okay. The moderator in the old days would say, well, to make it easier, would you mind lowering your hand? And that way he could say it's unanimous. But if the person says no, you'd have to do a hand count. So a couple of years ago, I brought a bylaw out that allowed the moderator the right to declare a 2/3 majority. Okay, so I've always been trying to speed up town meetings. And I've gone to a number of other towns to see how they do this, and some of them use clickers. And I have to tell you that I didn't like the systems they used. Some of the clickers they used made my TV remotes look tame. And I would give my left arm for a simple TV remote that had just 4 buttons on it. I don't need the rocket science stuff anymore. But in some of them were just incredibly complex. They spent $5,000 per meeting to rent them. They brought up it just didn't make a lot of sense. So I became aware of 3 companies in Massachusetts. 2 of them have lousy products, in my opinion. And the third is a company that we plan to go with called Meridia. And the gist of it is they have a small device. I should have sent you a picture of it. It's about 2/3 the size of my iPhone. I have an iPhone 12 or 13 here. And it has 2 buttons that are available to the people. And a little sleeve over it, and it'll be a yes and a no button, as simple as that. I can't get any easier than that. So The intent of this warrant article in the fall is to have the people vote to allow this and generate some discussion about the public and then move on. Now, the moderator has told me, and the moderator is co-sponsoring this article, so we're on board as to how this be used. I've looked at some towns that use clickers for every single article, and I don't think that makes any sense because it's a lot faster if, unanimous vote of the hall, just you take it and move on. The reason that I want to use clickers is because it's more accurate than having voters, tellers go up and down the aisles as people standing up and moving around. And number two, it's a lot faster, right? At the last town meeting we had at Algonquin, we spent 45 minutes on hand counts. Now, the way most towns do this, and I've gone to see the particular system we're going to use I've seen demonstrations, I've talked to the vendors, I've gone to Westwood to see theirs in action. The moderator has told me that he would use these when there's a 2/3 vote required or when there's a close vote. So every voter, when they check in, would be given a clicker. We record the numbers on them. I'll tell you about that in a second. And at the start of the meeting, there would be a test. And everyone would have a chance to show, they can explain how the machine is, the device is on very simply. It has a sleep feature, but you press any button and the screen comes to life. And it's yes or no. So anybody presses a button, and the first question might be, will the Patriots go to the Super Bowl? Simple like that. You vote yes or no. And the moderator sets a time limit as to how long the voting would be open. And while that window is open, you can change your vote. So when you press 1, it's received and you get a signal back to your device to acknowledge that your vote has been counted. If the window for voting is open, say the moderator says 30 seconds for a vote. If you want to press 2 to change your vote, automatically it changes back to 2 and you get acknowledgement and so forth. You can change it 12 times 0. The only one that counts is the one at the end. And while this is going on, there would be a connection from the laptop I'd have up with a receiver to bring all this to display on the screen the total number of people that have voted, not the vote. So if we wouldn't show that 7 have voted in favor and 6 against, none of that. But at the end, it would show the vote and the percentage and go from there. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The device is it really, as Al Hamill has said to me, it's basically a fancy garage door opener. It uses a 2.4 gigahertz signal. We would do something that there's a couple of wrinkles the way I would employ these if we could use them. The devices come with a serial number burned into the chip. Think of it like a MAC address on a network card, and they start at 1 and they go up to 10,000. So the other 28 towns in Massachusetts that use these right now all got them starting at 1. I don't want to start at 1. I want to start at pick a number, 7,311 or some number like that. It's advantageous for us for a couple of reasons. We plan to buy 600 of these things at about $30 a piece. Well, let's say we had a big meeting. We expect we're going to have more than 600 people. I can't borrow clickers from another town if those clickers in the other town are the same serial number as mine. But because nobody else started at 100, it makes us a very attractive partner with other towns to borrow clickers from them. So that's a simple thing to do, and they can certainly do that. The clickers themselves have a little label on the back of them to identify that when Matt Probst checks in, he gets number 27, say. Okay, I don't want to know how Matt votes. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the number of the external number. So if Matt really has 6,027, 6,053, 6053 is the electronic serial number, we're going to issue him number 27. So as every voter now gets a wristband, what we'll do is we'll actually write that number on the wristband. So Matt gets number 27, which is visible to the public. When you check in with the iPads that we use, it generates a little receipt, which is our backup for the log in case something were to happen. We're going to write 27 on that slip as well. We drop that in a little box. So that's the only way to connect Matt to the device that has number 27 on the outside of it. Other than that, I don't know that Matt has a device. So when the voting occurs, we will leave devices open. We'll start with the first, they come in groups of 50. We'll open up the first group of 50 and so forth. So if we know that 300 devices have been checked out, we will only open up the first 6 bags and we'll allow the first 300 to count in the system. At the end of the night, if number 27 isn't turned in, I don't know who has 27. I give those bags to the police officer. They look for 27 and they go knock on Matt's door. It's as simple as that. So there's the protection that nobody knows how you vote on an article and how that works. As to what happens internally, we will have in the springtime, We intend to rent these for one meeting. It's a cost of $5,000 to rent them for the meeting. The vendor comes up, does training, does a demonstration, all kinds of stuff. And if the town votes to buy them after that, they apply the $5,000 towards the purchase price. Every single town that has tried these has purchased them. Nobody has said no. The only feedback I've had from one clerk that was negative is, frankly, that the clerk is shouldn't be allowed to touch a computer. It's a lack of basic information on the clerk's part. It's not the technology. The technology is really simple. It uses watch batteries, lithium batteries. We will replace them. I'm going to have to do a little thinking because I would like to run a load test on the batteries, not just put a meter on them. They typically have typical Phillips, 4 small Phillips screws in the back. Instead, I said I want security screws on the back because I don't want anybody to be silly and bring a screwdriver in and just get bored and take them off in the meeting just because. In terms of failure, the only failures they've had with these devices are caused by people failing on them or stepping on them. All right, and that's we'll have spares to bring them out. I've talked to some of the students at the high school who are involved in the National Honor Society, and we're going to bring a bunch of high school students to the meeting in the spring, and they'll be helping people that aren't comfortable with these, and we'll have a bunch of kids available at every town meeting to run them back and forth. If we ran into a situation where we had to go to a situation where, let's assume we had to go to a situation where we had an overflow into the auditorium, from the auditorium into the gymnasium, we can put remote receivers in there and run them back into the hall. That has worked as well. I have seen them live down at Westwood. I went about 4 hours before the town meeting to watch exactly how they did this setup. I went the day before and talked to the clerk. I talked to the clerk the day before, but I went about 4 hours early to see all the setup and the testing. And these devices do penetrate the walls very well. They had their auditorium is about twice the width and twice the depth, plus a balcony in the back of ours. And their signals penetrated from that across the hallway through a second wall into another smaller auditorium on the back. There was no degradation. It was fine. There was no lapse, no anything. It worked out just very well. In terms of testing, the way they did it in Westwood, and what I would do is you test every single one of these, even if you think it's going to be like this town meeting should be relatively small when we come in October. If we had these clickers, I would test all 600 ahead of time. I take the batteries out before them just because that's one thing that I'm going to have to think about. I just don't want to throw away 600 lithium batteries after every event. I just don't want to fill the landfills. But honestly, that's what most towns do. It's simpler to put new batteries in. So anyway, at a minimum, we'll remove the batteries. But again, I want to come up with a way to through a load test on them to ensure that to be sufficient capacity to make it work. The package that we're buying would include spare receivers and spare cables in case we have a problem, and I will run spare receivers out along both sides of the auditorium. I'm very confident that the receiver that will be connected to my laptop on the screen will more than cover that whole hall, no questions asked. But it's short money to get the extra cabling, so it's just a Yagi antenna, an antenna with an SMA and an RS-232 cable. It's very straightforward stuff. So I'm just going to literally tape those along the wall, bring them back. And how would they fail? Somebody trips on the cable, somebody trips on my table, falls on it. It's a physical failure kind of a thing. And, life happens. So I'll just be ready for that. Let's see what else we have going on here. They come with a 3-year warranty. We expect to get about a 10-year life out of these. That's been what they have seen in other uses. Some systems in Massachusetts have been using them for more than 5 years. Occasionally there's a key failure. But again, we test them all ahead of time. If we need more, the vendor will loan them to us rent them to us for $5 a piece per meeting. But we're in a situation that we can borrow them from other towns. And I've already talked to other clerks, and everybody wants to be our partner because they can't borrow from the town next to them because they didn't, think about the numbering system. So we have a lot of people that'll help make this work for us. Let's see what else I've going on here. The devices will actually be locked in my safe. So this building itself has, it requires an access card to get into the building. This part of the building requires a master key, which several people have. So you call it a master key, it's really not. My office has my own lock that I put in. So nobody in the building, including maintenance, has a key to that. And I think facilities would be a little chagrined to know that, but that's the way it works. Nobody has a key to my office but me. We have a safe in here, only 3 people in here, the combination of the safe, the 3 people in our office. I also have another device in here that would tell me if somebody came in when they shouldn't have been in here. Let's just leave it enough said at that. It's not a camera, but it's another device. By the way, one of the most successful devices I ever saw in my prior life was a knucklehead, an intelligence officer that put a chocolate covered pretzel under a scatter rug in an apartment. Very, very effective. And one of our young agents was told, don't go anywhere, and he get bored in the middle of the night, and he stepped on the scatter rug. So at 2 a.m, he was said, go forth and find a chocolate covered pretzel to replace this sucker. So they're just very simple stuff. I just never want to have a situation where I worry about what's what. The devices themselves are stored 50 to a bag. We would use pre-numbered locked plastic pieces on, like you see in the back of a truck. Very secure. I'm not worried about that. I've already talked to the chief of police, the acting chief of police, about a method that we would use to ensure that when somebody leaves the hall, we retain control of that. If somebody leaves to use a restroom, we're going to have let's call it a clicker jail to secure it while the person's out. If you leave the building and if you leave the building for any reason, it's going to go in a one-way box, basically. Think of like a drop box, and you can't get it back. All right, and they will notify me up front. I'll notify the moderator, and we block the signal from that device. Pretty straightforward. These devices are used at at the House of Representatives in DC. They used at the Navy War College. They've used at the State Department, Veterans Affairs, Newport News Shipbuilding. It's not 6 guys in a garage. It's a pretty secure system. I'm pretty comfortable with this, and I like it. Like I say, I wanted to do this, but the first 2 I saw, they were way too complex. And this is simple. And I saw one another town used, and it had like 8 buttons on it. And they said, well, don't worry, we only use 2. Now you have to give people simple stuff. This device technically comes with 3 buttons, a yes, no, and a maybe. But we're going to have a sleeve put over that with a South Row seal on it that hides that 3rd button, which is actually be disabled anyway. So it's pretty straightforward. So let's take worst case scenario. This device fails during an event. Somebody says, hey, they didn't work, or my laptop blows up. Well, we're going to have a second laptop with the same software running as a backup independent of that. And neither one of these laptops will be connected to the internet anyway. They're just, dumb machines at that point. But, worst case scenario, something happens, the thing blows up. All right, well, we go back to the old fashioned way. We have the tellers come up and count the votes. It's, just, there you go. So again, my objective in this is it's faster and it's just plain more accurate. And, if you, in the fall, when we talk about this in a couple of weeks at the town meeting, I may well ask all the people that have been tellers at the town meeting to raise your hands and keep your hands up if you think that this is a more accurate way than having humans going up and down the halls and asking. And it really is. It just is. And we've had several votes recently that have been determined by 1 vote. I saw these in action in Westwood. They only had 1 vote of the night. And it was interesting. It was a zoning issue relating to some property, an MBTA issue. Now, typically, a change in zoning requires a 2/3 vote. But this legislation only required a majority vote. So it was interesting when they took the vote, it passed by a majority, but in fact, had it been a 2/3 vote, it would have failed by 1 vote. So it's very interesting. And that to me was very telling as well, because the voters had these for 3.5, 4 hours. And then it came time, the last vote of the night, they had all the clickers up and there were no surprises. And again, at the beginning of the meeting, the clerk, their name is Dottie Power. She's excellent. Came up and walked them through them again and just gave them a couple of quick questions. Everybody verified they worked and you're good to go. So,
hey, Jim, I do have one question.
Sure.
There is one advantage to the current system. I understand, all of the drawbacks to it. And I understand that you've, obviously thought this through very well. But, one thing that the current system allows is it allows for people to look around and see who's voting for what. And are you sure the town wants to lose that capability?
No, that's up to the voters, but that knife cuts both ways. And I said to people, I think this work. I'm in favor of this because it's faster, more accurate. But absolutely, there were people that said this is wonderful because I don't want to know somebody how they vote. Other people said, no, I want to know how so-and-so votes. And interesting, one person said to me, they're not up on technology issues, and they said they would prefer to see how they vote because they see somebody in the hall that they recognize as somebody that's knowledgeable about tech issues, and they vote the way that person votes. So this is entirely up to the voters what they're comfortable and not comfortable voting. I don't have a dog in that fight on that issue. It's a change, but it's up whatever the voters think.
Is it true, Mr. Haggerty, that this actually would not replace in any way well, I guess depending on the voters and depending on the moderator and what the decision they make. From my understanding, though, this would simply be only used in a case where there is the moderator decides you first take a visual vote, traditional vote, etc., and only where the moderator thinks that it would need to be counted through a traditional, um, counters, people walking up and down the aisle. That's only when you would use the digital votes, which means people in the hall already have had the opportunity to vote once, and they've already had the opportunity to see who votes which way. Is that accurate?
Not necessarily. Generally true, but again, I can't speak for the moderator. But if he implements this, let's say the whole voted unanimously for this article. That doesn't mean the moderator has to do this at a future meeting. The moderator decide, no, I think we're going to continue to do hand counts and so forth. And if we had these clickers available at a meeting down the road, it's entirely up to the moderator as to how they would be employed. The moderator could. My take on it is I think it's probably going to play out exactly the way you said. And it's interesting when you're up front. I always try to guess which way I think the hall's going to vote. And I've learned to keep my money in my pocket because I'd be losing my shirt. I always guess it correctly. You can just never tell how people are going to vote. And some things that you think are the most mundane issues end up being, holy cow, where did that come from? So my guess is it's probably going to come that way. But when the rubber hits the road, it's the moderator's call as to how this would be implemented.
Okay. Well,
And he's very conservative. He's very conservative these things.
If that is the resistance in the hall to this article saying, oh, this is somehow guaranteed to, take away our ability of seeing how others vote, we can simply say, no, that's not true. If the moderator and the hall want to continue doing the public votes for articles and only use the clickers as a follow-up or as a sort of a close tiebreaker, then that's the hall could decide that. But all it's saying is that simply because we're purchasing these clickers doesn't mean we're turning all votes into private votes, which I think is what people are concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, it wouldn't make sense. There are some towns that do that, and I don't understand it because it's just, why do you want to take 30 seconds on a vote when all in favor, all opposed, we're on to the next one, bang. Why do we want to spend time on that? But some towns, that's their personality. I mean, listen, some towns get through 40 articles a night. Some towns take a long time. It's just the nature of the beast. They're different personalities. So, but it'll be interesting to see how people feel about this. So somebody else, surprisingly, nobody has balked at the $18,600, which is kind of interesting. And I did some back of the envelope math on this. And what I came out to is that over 10 years using these things, if you do the math and you break it down as to how many hours we would save, it comes down to it comes out of this question, is an hour of your time worth about $9? Because that's what we'd save over the next 10 years on this. And yeah, if I could pay $9 and have a kid cut my grass, that would work for me. Or just we'll see what happens. But it'll be interesting how the people feel about this. And one last thing, when I talk to people that vote in town elections, and I know that they don't go to town meetings, sometimes I'll ask them. I said, I'm curious. You vote on every town election, but I've never seen you at a town meeting. Is there a reason why? And they say they take too long, and they don't like. That's it. It takes too long. So anything that we can do to speed up the town meeting and to make it more accurate, to me, that's a big plus. And for me personally, that's why I brought this forward.
I think it's great, Jim. I hope it passes. I would love to see us to be able to do something like this. The person by person counting just always seemed incredibly flawed to me.
Thank you. Before I started, they sent one person out per section of the hall, and that person came back and said, I had 56 over here, and nothing was on paper. No wonder they said, now that stops right now. So I had 2 people per section, right? It's just, you don't want to have skullduggery. You don't want to have somebody make a mistake, and we're still making mistakes. We're all human.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Hegarty? I would like to take a vote on this one because, as before all town meetings, for any technology-related spend, we are asked to share our opinion with those about technology-related spend, technology-related articles. And there are actually a couple of articles I want to touch on tonight, but let's first talk about the clicker item of Article 10. Any other questions before we vote as a committee on whether we support this or not? One other question for me is, I assume that this sounds like you're only putting the request in for 5,000 for the spring meeting to rent them. Would you then put in a follow-on article for the spring 2023 meeting for the actual purchase, and then vote on that at the end of the meeting to decide if town wants to go ahead and purchase them the rest?
That's a little convoluted. The money is a little convoluted here. There are two articles related to this. One is the article to add to the bylaw the method of voting, and the second is the funding issue here. The select board is meeting right now. They chose to put in $5,000 right now, and the other 13,600 would probably be added to the fiscal. The budget for next year would buy them on July 1. However, the select board may tonight decide to take this out and fund all 18,600 out of ARPA money. So I just don't know where that's going to come from, but it might come a different way. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
I do have a question that occurred to me, and that is what kind of proprietary hardware is involved in this? And do we have a good feeling that if the company ends up going bankrupt, that we won't have to throw away what we've bought?
I don't know how to handle this. Like I say, these aren't three guys working out of a garage. I mean, they provide this to the House of Representatives, New Hampshire, the U.S. House of Representatives, DC, the Navy War College, Navy Information Systems, the veterans. They're
okay. Then they're, I guess the only thing I would say is that it'd be great if they had some type of escrow in terms of the designs of the software and the hardware, so that if they did end up going out of business, someone else could pick it up, right? But if they have been purchased by the people that you're citing there, then that's a very good indication.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for all that research and all that explanation, Jim. I move that we support the clickers in Article 10 at at town meeting this fall.
Second.
All right, let's go around for a vote for support or not. Will?
Aye.
Larry? You're muted. I think that was an aye.
Aye.
Okay, Angela?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Likewise, aye. So unanimous support. Thank you, Mr. Hegarty. All right, so while we're here on these articles, I do see two other items in the warrant that are technology related. One is this payment management system software, which from my understanding is I know very little about it, but I understand it helps optimize, keep track of the conditions of roads, how recently they've been surfaced, resurfaced, managed, etc. And it uses a lot of data to help prioritize that. But Jim, do you have some comments on this?
No, Matt, I'm just going to jump off. I've got to jump into the selectmen's meeting.
Okay.
Have a good night, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jay, is this something that you could comment on?
I have the review on this was probably about maybe 5 or 6 months ago with the rep and Karen. They came in, they did a demo, they showed us everything on it. It is more of a cloud-based solution, and is definitely going to work for what they're looking to do. At DPW, this has not only been a conversation with me, but it's also been more of a conversation with the select board as far as what they want to do as well. After I kind of looked it over and seen what, if there was any kind of like necessary requirements as far as like physical requirements that I needed here, and found out that it was more of a cloud-based solution, and what type of security was in the background, and where, what all that meant. it kind of left my preview and kind of really fell into the select board. If you followed any of the select board meetings, it's been a hot topic with them a few times. As far as, you know, spending the money on it and using it, and what it would be used for. And I believe the select board has voted on it, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember the last time they spoke on it, what the support was on it.
Is there any insight? I mean, if it's cloud-based, that would imply there's some kind of subscription associated with it. Is the $27,000 just for some upfront software? Is there a subscription fee in addition to that, or does that include the subscription fee for some number of years? Or
I'm going to be honest, it's been a little while since I looked at that quote and the information that they got. I would have to kind of review it again. I believe there was a annual subscription fee. I just can't remember the actual number that was there. I would have to kind of go back to Karen and really dig into it a little bit more.
Do you happen to know if it supports a single sign-on, some sort of either like a SAML protocol or AD?
Yeah, and it also, and I had asked that question too, as far as like, could be integrated with like Duo or something to kind of, you know, for authentication. And yes, they had that ability at the time for two-factor authentication.
Okay.
Does it integrate with other GIS systems like, you know, Google?
As far as I know, that was the key point to it, is that it kind of downloads information from other GIS and Esri information as well. And
okay.
Yeah.
So there won't be, I mean, there shouldn't be much in the way of conversion if that's the case.
No, from what I remember, again, this was definitely like at least almost five months ago or so. From what I remember, there was definitely, it kind of like pulled in all that information into that system for them.
Okay.
There was some things that they needed to input, but it wasn't as major as like, you know, starting from scratch or something like that.
Right.
yeah, I mean, it is a little bit potentially troubling. You know, if you look at the A proposal, there's information about the fact that this is a rental cost, that the total cost is $18,600, and that the $5,000 would be applied. There's a fair amount of information there, and so there's nothing really being hidden. But B doesn't talk about ongoing cost at all. And if it's really $27,000 a year, I mean, it might be the right thing. I'm not necessarily arguing against it, but that seems like a lot of money to effectively have to deal with in perpetuity without actually noting it as part of the article. If that's what it is. Again, we don't know what it is, but
yeah. So I'll reach out to our contacts at the select board. It would have been great if, it sounds like I know they've talked about this before. It would have been great if they had come before the MTC previously and, you know, shared this, and we could have asked questions and revise. And again, once again, our goal is to be as supportive as possible, ask the right questions, make sure that this makes sense for the town, inclusive of making sure the warrant article itself is written so it is defensible. And it's something that is, you know, fairly obvious that we want to move forward. So I'll reach out to the select board, and I'm hoping maybe before we end tonight, we can schedule our October meeting prior to the town meeting so that we can have any last final questions answered, and we can discuss, you know, whether we will support it then or not. But I think there are some open questions in this that we'd like to see answered, so we can be supportive of this if it makes sense. Related to that, I also noticed Article 11, which is upgrading. Looks like our current assessor software has been end-of-lifed, being phased out, no longer supported. And so we're being forced to upgrade software to Assess Pro AP 5.0. I took a look at Patriot Assess Pro, and it looks like it's a thick app as opposed to a cloud app. Is that accurate?
It's a little bit of both. So I actually have to have something on-prem, but also it communicates to their database in the cloud as far as uploading. So the biggest problem with what they had in the past is they literally had to have a person come in physically and make these changes to the database that we have internal on a server. So if anything ever changed in your town, they would have to pay a side vendor, a side person who actually came in, took that data, uploaded it into Patriot, into Assessor Pro, and made those changes in the system, because it didn't have the ability to really go up and talk to like a GIS or an Esri system and say, okay, these are the changes, let's bring it down. So they had to pay a third party to come in who, that third party is sometimes unreachable or busy doing his other stuff. And we don't, the town doesn't want to just rely on one person, coming into, the town to make those changes for them all the time, because that person decides to retire tomorrow, is no longer in town, or something worse happens. They didn't want that risk factor. So making this change gives them not only the ability to always have that database updating, but alleviates the pressure of, counting on that one person to make those changes for them every time something did change in the town.
Do we happen to know if there's any, do we happen to have any, it sounds like we're going through the default route, just is upgrading the software in place. It's probably most compatible. It's going to be easiest to upgrade. They probably have built-in abilities to migrate existing data. Have we done any survey of alternatives and options that are potentially fully cloud-based?
I personally have not. I've kind of leaned a little bit in the sense of what the assessor knows and what he deals with on a daily basis. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in GIS and Esri in the sense. I've kind of really been dumped into the deep end with a lot of this. So I really do lean on them as far as what applications are out there and just supporting, in a sense, what I can, assist in a physical or virtual sense to get them going. I just know that in the time that I have been here and we had to work with, getting the system updated, it's been a pain. It's been a little bit of a pain for them to get their job done and know what the new changes are. If something got developed, they don't know about it, in the system, at least until someone comes in and forces that update into the system. So the assessor has been, discussing this with other assessors locally to us, and they've kind of really leaned on a lot of this application to get them in the right place. Should it have been brought to the MTC? Yeah, it most definitely should have. I probably slipped up on that one because the conversation just happened with the assessor, and I was just like, yeah, this is how we should do it, and this is where it should be, and it definitely slipped through the cracks as far as bringing it to the MTC. And now that I think about it, I definitely should have. But as far as what they need, the need is there. They're an aging system, and whether or not, and I don't want to say this in any kind of way, but if the MTC did or did not support, in a sense, they need this system like yesterday. They really do need the change to happen, because I feel for them, because they do rely on a single contact to get some of these things changed for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like it's end of life, no longer supported. It probably has security defects. We're probably opening ourselves to risk, etc. I think completely agreed. I think we just need to get to the point as a town that we are not tactically putting out fires and constantly making quick decisions without a lot of research, because it only brought to our attention at the very last moment. And I know I'm preaching to the choir for everybody involved, especially you, Jay. I know your life is a lot of just putting out fires, and people only tell you at the last moment and so forth. So, so I know I'm preaching to the choir for everybody here. So, but yeah, I'll if it's okay, I'd love to reach out to the Board of Assessors and just to get awareness of what they're doing, so that if questions do come up in the meeting, we can be supportive and say, yeah, this is the most, I'm guessing it is the most, out of 2 seconds of Google searching, I can't find anything. There's no obvious alternative.
Yeah.
But what do I know? So I just want to be able to go to a town meeting and, and be able to be supportive. So.
Agreed.
Okay, and are you aware of, Jay, any other tech spend articles in the warrant?
Not, not that,
I
no,
couldn't
not that
see any
I don't think
others.
the warrant shouldn't be that big as a spring town meeting. So
Yeah. Yeah.
luckily,
Yay. Should be a faster meeting, which would be
yeah.
nice. Okay. Great. Let's go ahead and go back to our agenda. Let's go back to digital access options for the transfer station. I reached out to the technology. I got redirected through MassDOT, the Department of Transportation, Massachusetts, over to the technology vendor that creates the underlying technology between that does all the easy pass systems. And they referred me to a local provider of scanners, easy pass scanners, as well as video camera um, uh, for license plate recognition. And once again, I'm not going to share specific quotes, but I will share it with you, Jay, and we can discuss offline. But in a nutshell, what's being proposed, if we were interested, love to get the select board's thoughts on this as well. But basically, a license plate reader system, no toll gates. So I know there's been expressed a concern at the transfer station. We don't want something that would create a backlog, like a physical gate that would go up and down, etc. So it can be as simple as basically a single license plate reader camera that is activated via one of the loops in the ground, those electromagnetic loops. So when a car starts approaching the transfer station, the camera fires up and starts reading license plates and basically reads the license plate and get the license plate recognition. And we maintain a list of sort of the allow list of people who paid for passes, which we're already maintaining. We already maintain a list of license plates because we give out stickers and they're associated with license plates. And however frequently the software would be all cloud-based, and it's effectively just a webcam with a PoE powered webcam that has a connection backhaul to the internet, and all of the logic and the recognition happens in the cloud software. So there's basically a one-time component as well as an ongoing monthly cost for the cloud service for the license plate recognition. And all the logic, etc. And basically the way it works is, we basically maintain what we consider a allow list, people who have paid for permits based on license plates. And on a, once a day or once a week or once a month, however we want to do it, we can generate a exception list. Give me a list of all the license plates that went through that were not on the approved list, ones that had purchased permits. And then we would need to create an arrangement with a state agency, and I'm reaching out to MassDOT to be able to see what it would take to do that, to do effectively chargebacks or issue the charges for the exceptions. So effectively, if somebody hasn't purchased a transfer station permit and they enter the transfer station, then how much do we want to charge them?
Is there any way of creating an exception proactively, Matt? And why I'm asking this is the transfer station is actually a social place. The Girl Scouts go there to sell cookies. Twice a year, they let either one of the Girl Scout troops go in and collect all the cans, and they get the money for their troop from doing that. But it is possible that we could have people going to the transfer station for reasons other than like dropping off stuff. And there's that whole swap shop thing there that I don't know if you need a sticker to participate in the swap shop, but I just don't know if there's a way of like saying, hey, we know next Saturday these people who don't have stickers are actually going to be accessing and they shouldn't be charged back.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there are people who go there to raise money for charities. There's also the issue that people go there to collect signatures, to get onto a ballot. And I'm not sure that legally we could prevent that.
I don't know anything about these systems really, but based on the fact that you have to pay the DPW every year for a sticker, it strikes me that there must be something like a start and end date associated with each allowed list entry, so that if your 1 year expires and you haven't actually paid for the next year, you know, it effectively is no longer active. But I mean,
Yep.
that strikes me
Yeah,
as potentially.
Yeah, you're completely right. I mean, that's exactly how it's basically a database of license plate numbers, and I have to imagine that there's a start and end date time with every license plate number that you enter into the system, and you basically can add and remove them and however you want.
Right.
And
So in theory, the Girl Scouts ought to be able to send an Excel spreadsheet with a list of license plates for next Saturday, and they'll have a start Saturday morning and Sunday morning or something like that.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a level of complexity getting into that. I mean, I agree. There's a lot of social aspects to the dump, and you know, I think we'd have to think those through pretty carefully before we put something in like this.
And of course, one of the things that mitigates it a little bit is if the reader is put on the ramp up to the dumpster, a lot of the fundraisers are actually over by the DPW garage on the right, and
Right.
you can drive in there without going
Yeah.
up.
But remember, I mean, you'd probably have to have 2 scanners at least, because there are 2 sides to the transfer station there, and you have to drive by one of the sides to get to anything else.
Are
Yeah.
they charged separately?
No, it's there are two ways to get in to dump your garbage, and one way you actually have to drive by that way in order to get to anything else in the transfer
But there's
station.
only one entrance to get to the 2 ways. After you drive in, you have to go up that little hill.
Oh, no, it's a one-way road coming down that hill, out of the swap shop and out of the recycling.
Yeah, let me share my screen here.
You don't use it, do you, Larry?
I go every Saturday, literally.
Yeah, but that's not a 2-way street coming out of the swap shop. That's a 1-way street right now.
Coming out of the swap shop, but you have to get up there, you go up the 2-way street.
Yeah. So
No. Oh, hold on. There's no 2-way street in the dump. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, let's take a step back. Okay, here's the entrance to the transfer station. Here's the DPW location. And then, of course, there's a one-way road to go up here and then into the air transfer area. And the proposal would be to place the POE camera right here. I don't know if everybody can see my pointer, facing eastward. So you basically have to be driving up this road towards the one-way road. Well, it's not one-way; it's two-way at that point in time. But you're basically reading people's front plates as they approach the loop.
Right. That makes sense.
And
so any activities over here would not be charged. You can go to the physical transfer, public works.
How do you get to the swap shop?
You have to
up this
drive around.
Road,
but my
all the way around.
My understanding is that when you come up into the 2-way street there, right? The 2-way street splits. One way goes to the right and to the transfer station and the 1-way, and the other is a 1-way exit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you get to the swap shop without getting scanned?
You can't.
You can't.
Right.
As of today, you cannot get to the swap shop without having a legal permit. This is not changing anything regarding policy.
So, okay, fine. But now we get back to the recycling places where people do charity and such, and the Girl Scouts and people who've been sentenced by the judge, but like myself, have to empty the can thing. Those people are going to get scanned as well, right?
Right, but let's not lose sight of the fact that the number of exceptions is probably very small, because all of the people, or the vast majority of the people doing any kind of activity there, are town residents, And the likelihood is very, very high that they actually have DPW stickers. So it's really going to be that occasional Boy Scout or Girl Scout whose parents never got a DPW sticker for whatever reason, like maybe they have their own trash pickup by
Would be
Okay,
me.
okay,
Sure.
that, which is fine, but you, Larry, earlier, you said, well, people could send a spreadsheet. Well, that would be every time that they'd be sending a spreadsheet, right?
For the exceptions, yeah.
But
At least for the ones that I'm aware of, I don't think that would be insurmountable to send a spreadsheet because it's only done a couple of times a year.
It's only a couple times a year.
I am skeptical that the cost of this and the complexity of this is going to be payback sufficiently. I mean, I think Angela brought up the killer point, which is that the dump is not just a dump. The dump is a social gathering area, and you know, when it becomes a social gathering area, and it's a lot more than just garbage, and it has to do with, you know, charity and collecting signatures and all of that such, and also going to the swap shop. I don't see why, you know, people have to have a sticker to go to the swap shop right now, and I would have no problem with them going to the swap shop without a sticker, to tell you the truth.
Well,
So
that from my understanding, and correct me wrong, to be able to get to any of the recycling, to be able to get to the trash station, you have to have a sticker to be able to get there. That's the town policy. Whether you have that interest or not, Will, quite frankly, quite candidly, your desire here does not change town policy.
No, but my point is that right now, town policy, yes, you're exactly right. If someone comes in to use the transfer station or to recycle, yes, both of those, they have to have a sticker. But I'm not sure that we're having enough exceptions and enough people, you know, basically stealing, that it's going to justify the cost and the complexity of this. And then there are other valid things where people who do not have stickers and who do not go to the transfer or the recycling, but go to the charity or go to the swap shop, I think that's fine. So I just say that, you know, this is one where this is going to be a very emotional issue. And I myself right now, based on what I've heard so far, I would definitely speak against it.
So, well, I do agree that we need to take a step back and say, what is the purpose of the system? Like, why don't we just do a trust-based system, not even have stickers? And how often are the stickers themselves read? And how often are people bypassing this I've heard, and again, I've heard one of the reasons why there's a desire for such a system is because there are landscaping companies going in and dumping massive loads there without stickers, and we simply don't have the people.
You know, we might be actually overcomplicating this because we're looking at this as a pre-processing problem rather than a post-processing problem. It could be that the exceptions are handled after the fact. In other words, at the end of the month, when we get a list of people who've gone in, we can then remove the people who were allowed to go in that day from the list before they're sent a bill. We don't have to actually get spreadsheets and update the allowed list.
But let's talk about,
and that makes it a much simpler. And again, I have no idea whether the software and the system supports either of those options. But it strikes me that worrying about it after the fact rather than before the fact does make it easier.
But let's talk about the exception that Matt just mentioned, and that is landscaping trucks and dumping a whole bunch of stuff. We actually pay a person who sits there inside that building where all the trash gets dumped into the V there, and they are watching, and they're periodically sweeping the garbage in and all of that. And I would hope that they would be the one who would notice these landscaping trucks and then raise the issue.
How much? I would hope that as well. But the question is, how much are we paying them to watch people's windshields?
Well, no,
and
but
let's calculate their. Let me finish. Let's calculate their salary. How much are we paying them? Just even spending any time looking at people's windshields and monitoring whether they have a valid certificate and matching it up to the right license plate. Is it renewed for this year, etc.? Is it worth their time Or is it,
Well,
are we paying a human to do what a camera can do right now? We just have to ask our question. That's that question, right?
okay, but I'm just saying, if we're talking about landscaping trucks, that's not, you don't even have to worry too much about reading the windshields of everybody. That's going to be pretty obvious, and they can go check that on an exception basis. Okay. And as far as, calculating the cost and everything, if we're going to handle this as a post-processing or whatever, still someone would have to be doing that. And so that's also time spent as well. So let's just think about this and whether or not this is really amenable to an automated solution.
I think it's a fair question to go back and say, I don't believe we've got an update from DPW as to the current scope of the issue, whether it's the landscapers, the contractors, what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the question is, what percentage? Are the DPW themselves aware of the scope of how many cars got through without specific passes? So I think we need to include both absolutely DPW in the discussion, but also other people in town, because I'm hearing more rumblings, not from DPW, because DPW, everybody noticed that our transfer station tickers went up from price this year, right? Everybody's seeing the increase in price, and people are also complaining that, again, I'm not personally saying this, but I've heard through friends in town, they say, they saw large trucks come in without stickers and they got through, etc. So, this is both DPW. We need to collect their input as well as get the residents, feedback and understand the scope of this problem and what are we actually trying to solve for. So
yeah, I would just say that I still have nightmares about when they first put in an Easy Pass here. And I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a time there where the Mass Pike Authority, if their reader didn't work and they thought that you were getting through the toll without having a reader, without having a transponder, they would automatically send you a ticket, a very sizable ticket with a penalty. And in fact, if you collected too many of these, you'd be in really deep trouble. And you had to go to an appeal process for every one of these things. It was crazy. And I don't want to be anywhere near something like that in the future.
And I want to just add my own testimonial that when I first moved to Massachusetts 7 years ago, I was horrified that people were still handing out tickets and going through physical toll booths. I felt like I was moving back 20 years in technology, moving to Massachusetts.
And I agree.
As somebody who commuted the Pike every day of the week, I despise those toll booths, and I was the first to celebrate them going away. So
I celebrated that too. That's fantastic. All I'm saying though is that when the system first came in, it was horrible because innocent people who were trying their best to comply were getting these huge fines. I got 10 or 12 of these things at one point. I had to go and I had to appeal to all of them. And it wasn't, I had the transponder, everything was fine. It was just that the reader was not reading well or whatever. And, I kept getting caught.
I see. So this is the problem of a scofflaw complaining about the laws. Okay.
I was not a scofflaw. That's just it. I was not a scofflaw, and yet I was being treated like a scofflaw, and I don't want to go to that at all. And believe me, I have a feeling that the people who ended up being responsible for treating us poor law-abiding citizens so badly did not have a good outcome there, and I don't want us to be on that side.
I agree completely. On the other hand, we have the benefit of 10 years worth of additional development on all of that equipment.
And we appreciate, Will, all the QA work you did with them, working hand in hand and debugging all these issues. So,
well, like I said, I still have PTSD from that. And believe me, if we put something like this in and we don't have it, we don't have the I's dotted and the T's crossed, I'm going to make damn sure that people know where to direct their comments. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Well, we have time. We have time, given that we have till next year, right? We are already selling tickets from September to September. And so we have the up until September 2023 to decide what we're going to do next. I think we just want to start the conversation.
Right.
That's
And
all.
it sounds
Okay.
like the next step is just to get a deeper understanding of the operation of the system so that we can determine whether actually it will work from us from a process point of view or not.
Well, and then there's also just, fundamentally the cost issue too, right?
Yeah.
What it's going to cost, and is it really saving anything, or is it buying enough goodwill that we would be happy with it, right? That would be the other issue.
Yeah. So yeah, something we should review. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Network coverage. I know we only have a few minutes left. Make sure we end on time. Network coverage holes, cellular deserts. Angela, do you want to provide an update on where we are with that?
Yes, so I've run into problems trying to open tickets with all the different providers. Basically, if you don't have an account under that provider, they don't want you to open a ticket for them. So I've been spamming them quite hard on their socials, and I've gotten a number of responses, but T-Mobile's claiming that their integration with Sprint is causing congestion issues. So they're basically saying, hold on, it's going to get better in a couple months after we do our full integration with Sprint. AT&T has been the least responsive, and Verizon is basically saying, you have to open up a ticket. So I think we're almost back to the point if we've got to take we have 94 people that, signed the petition to try to get something done. We're going to need a couple of those folks to actually open tickets, and then figure out if there's a way that we can attach the petition onto each of those tickets so that we can, give them an actual overview with somebody who has each of those various services. So this one's going to take time. And Jay, I don't know if you have, the other thing I think we're hoping to get is, do we have an AT&T rep, a Verizon rep, a T-Mobile rep, somebody that could help us navigate the insides of the companies better and get to some of the right groups?
I don't necessarily, especially with cell towers.
It's more of an infrastructure issue.
Yeah, exactly. I
who signs our town contracts with the providers? Does it go straight through the Board of Selectmen, or is that owned by DPW?
You mean for cell service or for cable service?
For cell service.
I'm not sure that there is any contract.
Yeah, I don't think there is a contract.
There's nothing at the town
it's
level.
More of a cable.
Right. And in fact, quite the opposite, which is that, under the Trump administration, the FCC adopted some extremely favorable regulations for the providers, for AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, because they wanted to get 5G shoved down everybody's throats. And basically, if a town was opposing 5G antennas, no matter how ugly they might be, the providers could come in and just shove them right down your throats. And the presumption was that the town, literally, I'm not kidding, the presumption was that the town was trying to extort the carriers and take their money that they needed to make America great again. And I'm not in any way exaggerating that. That's exactly what and I think is still on the books. Now, obviously, we're not talking about 5G here, but I would just be careful that you are baiting a bear that has a lot of friends in DC. And if you're not ready to fight bears, just be careful where you're treading there. Okay.
I don't think the right answer is to go back to the people that live on Maple Crest and Pinecone and say, gee, if you want good cell service, you have to move. I mean,
that's exactly what the vendors say. Or they say you can buy no, I'm not kidding. You can buy a $250 extender or whatever. Yeah. And
I asked some of the residents in that area if any of them had purchased an extender, and one person said that they did, and it hadn't really helped. So there's something geographically about that area that's a problem.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying that having dealt with it, I mean, on the cable side, it's a lot easier because there's a lot of laws that are much more in favor of the town, and so we can get fairly favorable licensing agreements. But when it comes to cell service, good luck.
Just out of curiosity, do the other vendors, I have Verizon, and Verizon supports Wi-Fi calling. Do the other vendors support that also? Because, I only get one or two. I've actually never looked at my cell service here, but I only really get one or two bars. And, I've turned on Wi-Fi calling and, I never have a problem. And I'm
But you're
just
going
wondering-
through your Wi-Fi, your home Wi-Fi, right?
Yes.
Right.
And for the most part, and I realize there are exceptions, but for the most part, everybody has internet service. And everybody has Wi-Fi in their house. And, I know everybody doesn't really mean everybody, but close. Maybe
It
if
may
we
come
can't
down
make
to
headway
us
here-
having to come up with a list of best practices or, tips and tricks and, stuff
Right.
like that.
I'm not
So,
suggesting that we give up yet. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
that what you're saying might be another approach also, and that is, here's a list of best practices.
I like that.
Here's a use for the checking out of the hotspots out of the library.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we have one participant in the audience, Manu Chopra, who would like to talk. So or express a comment. We'll turn the time over to him for a second. Okay, go ahead. Manu. Manu, do you have a comment?
Are you sure he's a real guest?
A curious question I have.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. All right. Great. Let's go ahead and we're pretty much out of time. And action items review. Do we want to review the action item tracker? I don't think if we have an updated one.
I don't have an updated one. It fell off my sort of mental list, but I will have one for next meeting, I promise.
Okay. All right. Great. Let's go ahead and take a look at our calendars and see if there's any possibility we could meet before town meeting in October. What's the day of town meeting?
I thought it was like the 15th.
13th.
13th. So that's Thursday the 13th.
Okay.
What is would everybody possibly be available on Tuesday the 11th?
Tuesday, the
I-
11th of October?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I can do that.
Yes.
Hold on here. Yeah, I can do that.
It's clear.
Okay. Jay and Ryan, open to work for you?
Tentative on me. I think I have something coming up with. Let me double check. I just got to double check if I'm good.
Okay.
But
I think it might be I should say abbreviated meeting. Obviously, there's not many weeks between now and then, but I'd love to briefly discuss those articles, so forth. So, all right, let's go ahead and put that as our tentative next meeting for October. Ryan, would that work for you, Ryan O'Leary?
Yeah, that should be good.
Wonderful. Great. All right. Anything else before we close?
I move
Not.
adjournment.
Yeah. Any seconds?
Second.
All right. Let's go around the room. Will?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
And likewise, aye. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time. It's been a great meeting, and have
You
a great
guys.
rest of your